When fans look back at some of the most unforgettable wars in women's MMA history, one bout stands above almost all others: Julija Stoliarenko versus Lisa Verzosa at Invicta FC Phoenix Series 3. This wasn't just a fight, it was a battle drenched in blood, grit, and raw determination. Before the cage door even shut, the hype surrounding this clash was electric. Both fighters had everything to prove, and with the vacant bantamweight championship on the line, the stakes could not have been higher. Julija Stoliarenko, known for her relentless grappling and savage armbar finishes, entered the fight with a reputation for being nearly impossible to break. She was aggressive, fearless, and dangerous every single second she was inside the cage. On the other side stood Lisa Verzosa, a fighter with a heart bigger than the cage itself. Verzosa wasn't just a competitor. She was a warrior who refused to go away no matter how brutal the storm against her became. This matchup was destined to explode. From the walkouts alone, you could sense the intensity. Stoliarenko marched down with an ice-cold expression, ready to drag her opponent into the deep waters of pain. Verzosa, on the other hand, carried the aura of defiance. She had no intention of being another highlight on Julija's resume. The commentary team reminded fans that this fight could very well steal the show, and oh, did it ever. As the bell rang for round one, neither fighter hesitated. There was no feeling-out process, no cautious circling. Instead, fists flew immediately, leather smacking against flesh in the kind of exchange that makes the crowd rise to its feet instantly. Stoliarenko pushed forward with pressure, firing combinations before looking for her patented clinch entries. Verzosa absorbed the shots, firing back with jabs and crosses that kept Julija honest. The pace was insane right out of the gate, and you could almost predict this wouldn't be a technical chess match. It was going to be an all-out war. Midway through the opening round, blood already began to flow. A stiff shot opened a cut, and the crimson started painting the canvas. For many fighters, this would have been a moment of panic, but for these two women, it only fueled the fire. The sight of blood didn't slow the action. It ignited it. Each strike seemed to land harder than the last, each clinch exchange tighter and more desperate. By the end of round one, both fighters had already shown why this matchup would go down as one of the most savage battles in Invicta history. The crowd inside the arena roared with approval, while fans watching from home couldn't believe what they were witnessing. Round one was just the beginning, yet it already looked like a fight that could headline any card in the world. The real question wasn't just who would win, but how much punishment either of them could endure before the body finally gave out. If round one had fans on the edge of their seats, round two blew the roof off the arena. From the very first exchange, Julija Stoliarenko and Lisa Verzosa showed that neither of them had any intention of slowing down. Instead, they doubled down, throwing punches with reckless abandon, and that's when the fight turned into something unforgettable. The canvas became soaked in blood, and the cage transformed into a true battlefield. The cut that had opened in round one on Verzosa's face now began pouring, but Lisa didn't back off. She bit down on her mouthpiece and fired back as if every drop of blood fueled her determination. Stoliarenko, known for her ruthless pressure, saw the crimson mask forming and pressed forward with even more aggression. Every jab and cross seemed to splatter red mist into the air, and every clinch against the fence left streaks of blood across both fighters' torsos. The audience gasped with every heavy shot, and commentary struggled to keep up with the sheer brutality unfolding before them. "This is unbelievable," one commentator exclaimed. "How are these two women still standing?" The fight was quickly becoming less about skill and more about willpower. Who could endure the storm longer? Julija tried multiple times to drag Lisa to the ground, searching for her signature armbar. She nearly locked it in once, twisting Verzosa's arm into a frightening angle. Fans screamed, expecting Lisa to tap out, but somehow, with blood dripping into her eyes and the pain etched across her face, Verzosa fought her way out. That escape drew one of the loudest reactions of the night. She refused to give Stoliarenko the satisfaction of ending things early. Meanwhile, Verzosa wasn't just surviving. She was firing back with her own offense. She landed stiff right hands that snapped Julija's head back. Each strike drew more roars from the crowd, who couldn't believe the resilience she displayed. It was the kind of grit that turns fighters into legends, even in defeat. By the halfway point of round 2, the cage looked like something out of a horror movie. Blood stained the mat, streaked across both fighters' gloves, and smeared onto their shorts. Doctors at ringside began watching closely, prepared to step in if things went too far. But these were warriors who didn't care about clean faces or comfort. They cared about proving who wanted that bantamweight championship more. The pace never slowed. Exchanges were wild, and every punch carried the weight of desperation. Stoliarenko's wild forward momentum clashed perfectly with Verzosa's iron will, creating a clash so intense that fans knew they were watching history. As the horn finally sounded to end round 2, the crowd erupted in applause. Both women staggered back to their corners, dripping, exhausted, and yet somehow still full of fight. This wasn't just an MMA contest anymore. It was a test of heart, courage, and the sheer refusal to quit. By the time round 3 began, it was clear that this fight had already cemented itself as one of the bloodiest battles in Invicta FC history. But the championship rounds 3, 4, and 5, would take things to an entirely new level. These weren't just minutes on the clock, they were trials of survival, where heart mattered more than skill. Julija Stoliarenko came out first, breathing heavily but still marching forward like a tank. Her eyes locked on Lisa Verzosa, who now wore a full crimson mask. Blood dripped down onto her chest, staining the canvas with every step she took. Yet Lisa's body language screamed defiance. She wasn't there to crumble. She was there to fight until there was nothing left in her. The opening moments of round 3 saw another furious exchange of strikes. Julija's wild hooks battered Lisa against the cage, but Verzosa responded with crisp counterpunches that stunned Stoliarenko. Fans inside the arena were standing, many with hands over their mouths in disbelief. Every shot seemed capable of ending the fight, but neither warrior would fall. Midway through the round, Julija finally got Lisa down and immediately hunted for her signature armbar. The arena went silent as she locked Lisa's arm and wrenched back with every ounce of strength. Verzosa grimaced, her face twisted in agony, yet somehow she refused to tap. In a moment that showcased pure grit, Lisa managed to stack Julija and roll out of the submission attempt. The crowd exploded. This was resilience at its absolute peak. The escape seemed to ignite Verzosa. Despite the blood loss and exhaustion, she began walking forward, throwing straight punches that cracked against Julija's jaw. One clean right hand sent Stoliarenko stumbling back. It was the kind of moment where fans believed an upset was possible, that maybe Lisa could shock the world by turning the tide, but Stoliarenko was just as stubborn. She shook off the strikes, roared back, and unloaded with her own barrage. The two women stood toe-to-toe in the center of the cage, trading punches like warriors from another era. Every strike echoed through the arena, and every drop of blood made the atmosphere feel even more surreal. By the end of round 3, doctors once again considered stepping in. Verzosa's face was nearly unrecognizable, yet she begged to continue. "I'm fine," she mouthed to officials as her corner wiped away blood. The heart she displayed only made the crowd love her more, while Julija's relentless pressure reminded everyone why she was one of the most feared grapplers in women's MMA. Rounds 4 and 5 carried the same intensity. The pace slowed slightly, but the drama only deepened. Both fighters were exhausted, swinging with everything they had left. Julija repeatedly dragged Lisa to the ground, threatening submissions, while Lisa somehow found ways to escape and retaliate with striking bursts. The final minutes of round 5 were pure drama. The crowd was on its feet, roaring with every exchange. Both women, covered in blood and sweat, looked like they had walked through a war zone. And when the horn finally sounded, they collapsed into their corners, knowing they had left every ounce of themselves inside that cage. This wasn't just a fight. It was a war that showcased the rawest form of human determination. As the final horn echoed through the arena, both fighters slumped back to their corners, drenched in blood, sweat, and exhaustion. The crowd gave them a standing ovation, recognizing that they had just witnessed one of the most brutal and unforgettable fights in Invicta FC history. But as often happens in combat sports, the outcome wasn't going to be decided by a knockout or submission. Instead, it was going to rest in the hands of the judges. Julija Stoliarenko, battered but still upright, raised her arms in anticipation. She had dictated much of the pace, pushed the grappling exchanges, and nearly locked in multiple arm bars. From her perspective, the fight was hers. Lisa Verzosa, however, had a different story to tell. Despite being bloodied beyond recognition, she had shown incredible resilience, landing powerful counterstrikes and surviving submission attempts that would have ended most fights. To many in the audience, her ability to withstand Julija's onslaught made her the emotional winner. The arena buzzed with nervous energy as the fighters were brought to the center of the cage. The ring announcer held the scorecards in hand. Fans leaned in, their voices lowering to a hush. This wasn't just about a title. It was about respect, about survival, about whose name would forever be attached to one of the bloodiest battles in Invicta history. The announcer read the scores aloud. Judge 1 scored it 48-47 for Verzosa. Judge 2 scored it 48-47 for Stoliarenko. Judge 3, 48-47 for Stoliarenko. It was official. Julija Stoliarenko by split decision. The moment the decision was announced, the arena erupted, but not in unison. Half the fans cheered for the new champion, recognizing her relentless grappling and constant pressure. The other half booed, furious that Verzosa's superhuman toughness and late-round striking hadn't been enough to sway the judges. It was a divisive moment that sparked debates not just in the crowd, but across social media in the hours that followed. Stoliarenko collapsed to her knees, overwhelmed with emotion, as the Invicta FC bantamweight championship belt was fastened around her waist. For her, it was vindication, proof that her all-or-nothing style could lead her to gold. She had left everything in the cage, and now she was walking out as champion. Lisa Verzosa, however, was not broken. Despite the loss, she stood tall, covered in blood but refusing to show defeat in her body language. Fans cheered louder for her than perhaps anyone that night. In many ways, Lisa's performance made her a bigger star in defeat than Julija was in victory. She didn't need the belt to earn respect. Her courage had already secured her a permanent place in MMA history. The split decision fueled debates for weeks. Some argued Julija's submission attempts and cage control were undeniable. Others insisted Lisa's striking and heart should have edged her to victory. But that's what made the fight so unforgettable. It wasn't just about violence, it was about perspective. And while Stoliarenko left Phoenix Series 3 with the championship, Verzosa left with something equally valuable, the undying respect of fans worldwide. The fight between Julija Stoliarenko and Lisa Verzosa didn't just end inside the cage, it echoed far beyond the walls of the Phoenix Series 3 arena. The moment the scorecards were read and Stoliarenko was crowned bantamweight champion, the MMA community split into two loud, passionate camps. On one hand, Julija's supporters celebrated her victory as the culmination of years of grit, sacrifice, and relentless pursuit of excellence. They pointed to her near submissions, her unrelenting pressure, and her ability to dictate the grappling exchanges as undeniable proof she deserved the belt. In their eyes, the judges had made the right call. But for many others, Lisa Verzosa was the real star of the night. Photos of her bloodied face circulated on Twitter, Reddit, and Instagram within minutes. Headlines labeled her performance as warrior-like and the heart of MMA. She had been painted as a modern-day gladiator, beaten, bloodied, yet unbroken. Fans around the world felt her toughness embodied the very essence of combat sports, the refusal to quit even when every instinct screamed otherwise. In fact, many fans argued that Verzosa had won in the court of public opinion. "She may not have the belt, but she has my respect forever," read one viral comment. Others went as far as to say the fight was Lisa's greatest win in defeat. The imagery of her standing tall despite her crimson-covered face became symbolic, inspiring countless memes, fan edits, and tribute videos across social media. Media outlets couldn't get enough either. MMA journalists called it one of the bloodiest fights in Invicta history, drawing comparisons to legendary UFC wars like Forrest Griffin versus Stephan Bonnar. Analysts debated for days about the decision, breaking down strike counts, submission attempts, and control time. But the real story was the fight's emotional impact. It wasn't just about stats. It was about heart, willpower, and the kind of drama that turns fighters into legends overnight. For Invicta FC, the bout was a goldmine of publicity. Suddenly, people who had never watched an Invicta card were clicking highlights and replaying clips. The fight boosted the reputation of women's MMA as a whole, proving once again that female fighters could deliver brutality, drama, and storytelling equal to, if not beyond, their male counterparts. The legacy of the fight extended beyond just two names. Fans began calling for an immediate rematch, demanding that Verzosa be given another shot at Stoliarenko. Whether or not that would happen, one thing was clear. This fight had carved out a permanent place in the history books. Future generations of fighters would look back at this war as a benchmark for toughness and entertainment. Years later, when conversations about the bloodiest fights in women's MMA arise, Stoliarenko versus Verzosa is always among the first mentioned. It wasn't just a contest for a belt. It was a story of resilience, suffering, and survival. And in that story, both women walked away as champions in their own right, one with a belt and the other with the admiration of the entire MMA world. When the dust settled after Julija Stoliarenko versus Lisa Verzosa, it was clear that fans hadn't just witnessed another Invicta FC fight. They had experienced a story, a war that tested the limits of human toughness, endurance, and willpower. Fights like these remind us why we watch MMA in the first place. Not just for knockouts or highlight reels, but for the raw emotion and drama that only combat can deliver. For Julija, the victory marked the pinnacle of her journey. She wasn't just another fighter holding gold. She was now etched in history as the woman who conquered one of the most savage battles Invicta had ever seen. The belt symbolized more than just wins and losses. It stood as proof of her ability to survive chaos and still find a way to impose her will. Her legacy was secure as the relentless grappler who could endure a storm and still rise above it. For Lisa Verzosa, defeat became transformation. Not every loss tarnishes a career. Some elevate it. This was one of those moments. In a sport where toughness is currency, Lisa proved she was wealthier than most. Bloodied, battered, but unbroken, she left the cage that night with something far more valuable than a strap of leather and gold: the respect of fans, peers, and even her opponent. People weren't just calling for a rematch. They were calling her one of the toughest fighters they had ever seen. In many ways, she became the heartbeat of the fight, the symbol of why fans rally behind warriors who refuse to quit. The legacy of this fight lives on because it delivered on every level. Technically, it showcased grappling brilliance and stand-up exchanges. Emotionally, it struck fans right in the heart, giving them a story they could never forget. Historically, it boosted the reputation of women's MMA, proving once again that female fighters can headline cards, steal shows, and deliver classics that fans talk about for years. But perhaps the biggest reason this fight matters is because it blurred the line between victory and defeat. Julija walked out with the championship, but Lisa walked out with immortality. Together, they gave us a war that transcended records and rankings. And now, as you reflect on this epic battle, we want to hear from you. Do you think the judges got it right? Should Lisa Verzosa have walked out with the title? Or was Julija Stoliarenko's dominance enough to secure her crown? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because debates like these are what keep the sport alive. If you enjoyed reliving this historic clash, make sure to hit that like button to show your support for women's MMA. Don't forget to subscribe to Combat Clips for more legendary battles, unforgettable highlights, and stories from the toughest fighters in the game. And turn on that notification bell so you never miss the next war inside the cage. This wasn't just a fight. This was history in motion. This was Stoliarenko versus Verzosa, a reminder that when the cage door closes, legends are born.